I'm Horace Douty in Lexington, Virginia, and each Thursday I bring you a local history lesson by way of YouTube. And I hope that if you like these lessons, you will go to Horace Douty YouTube and click on like, click on subscribe, and then click on the little bell icon so that you'll be notified. And share these lessons with your family and your friends. I appreciate it. Today, I want to talk about James Waddel, the blind preacher. He was born in Ireland. James Waddel, in 1739, came to America that same year in his mother's arms. Her influence gradually led little James into exceptional piety and eventually into the Presbyterian ministry. But James Waddel was always a man in full. William Henry Foote, the historian, calls him a man for all generations, a title, as far as I know, given only to Reverend James Waddel. As a teenager, young Jimmy had his hand almost severed by an accidental blow from his brother's axe during an exciting rabbit hunt. Although it was carefully sewn back on by his parents, the mutilated hand never functioned normally. Through the years and into adulthood, James longed for the touch of Jesus, who in that graphic story from the gospel healed the man with the withered hand. In 1762, that man, James Waddel, began his ministry in Virginia, in the northern neck, the low country, where the great Potomac and Rappahannock rivers enter the bay. Frail health drove him closer to the exhilarating climate of the valley that we enjoy so casually. Reverend Waddel settled over at Tinkling Spring Church near what is now the front entrance of Augusta Medical Center, just off Interstate 64. During the Revolutionary War, Reverend James Waddel preached to our Rockbridge soldiers, one of whom was Samuel Houston, at Steele's Tavern, on their way to defeat the British in the pivotal Battle of Guilford Courthouse. Now be aware, this is not General Sam Houston who came along 100 years later. This is the Reverend Dr. Samuel Houston. And history also suggests that George Washington may have made use of such inspiring preaching when his army was suffering defeat after defeat in those earlier years of the war. William Wirt, in Letters of a British Spy, gives us the most famous description of Waddel when total blindness had come upon him. Wirt had stopped by the meeting house not out of piety but curiosity, and his first impression was dramatic. Here's what he wrote, quote, "Little did I suppose that in the wild woods of Virginia I was to meet with a man whose eloquence would give to the sacrament a sublime pathos I had never before experienced. As this blind old man descended from the pulpit to distribute the mystic symbols, there was more than a human solemnity in his manner, which made me shiver. That pastor drew a picture of the suffering of Christ, the trial, the crucifixion, and the death. And although I was familiar, it was as if I was hearing the story for the first time. We in the congregation hung on every word. The preacher, tears streaming, breathed the gentle prayer Christ uttered, 'Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.' The force of his feelings burst into an irrepressible flood of grief. The whole house responded into groans and sobs as the congregation, raising his sightless eyeballs to the sky, clasping his hands to his breast, the tremulous old voice spoke in quiet fervor, Socrates died like a philosopher, Jesus Christ like a god. If the preacher had been an angel from heaven, the effect would not have been more divine. End quote. William Wirt could not forget that holy experience. As he rode on to Richmond, he felt that Waddel was the most stimulating orator in the world. And Wirt was astounded to find that no one there knew James Waddel. And they asked, is this not strange that such a genius, so accomplished a scholar, so divine an orator, should be permitted to languish and live and die in obscurity within 80 miles of the metropolitan area of Richmond? That was the question. And today, I can say with some satisfaction, Mr. Wirt, sir, we would probably never have heard of you had you failed to write of Reverend James Waddel. Is that not also strange? This saintly Parson Waddel had to deal with more than a crippled limb and sightless eyes. Toward the end of his life, he was called before Presbytery to answer two charges. One, he had allowed his daughter, both of them, to learn the formal dance called the minuet. That was against the religion. And Waddel had missed a couple Presbytery meetings. And after a year of grueling procedures and endless testimony and investigation, the case was finally settled in favor of the old blind pastor. And that says something good about Hanover Presbytery in 1796. His daughter, Janetta, married a Rockbridge boy who was destined to become famous. Her husband's name is Reverend Archibald Alexander, founder of Princeton Theological Seminary. There is your lesson for today.